Belief is the single most important thing you could ever give to someone. On the contrary, lack of belief can be one of the most devastating diseases to ever enter a human body. Fortunately, I know a lot about both of those. I grew up on the Ohio River in Portsmouth, Ohio. That river used to be a source of strength, a source of pride. It shipped out grains from the farms, it shipped out steel from the mills, it shipped out products from our factories. My people were the river rats. We might cuss a little, drink a little more, but we fight hard, laugh harder, and love the hardest. Growing up as a kid, you'd ride your bikes, you'd play in the woods, and you'd cruise the strip. I loved that place growing up. But after high school and college, in a post-9/11 world, I found myself along another river, the Tigris River in Iraq. People often ask me what it was like to be in Iraq, and that answer is different for everyone, but for me, I had never felt such pride and purpose in my life. I was an intelligence officer assigned to a special forces unit, and I had the honor to learn from some of the best and brightest minds in the military. During the 04 to 06 time frame, at the height of the insurgency, we were fighting a vicious enemy who used fear as their main weapon. What terrorists lacked in the form of conventional weapons, they make up for in psychological weapons. Fear is their main tool, was their main tool, in getting the Iraqis to lose hope and belief in a better way of life. The way to fight that fear is to develop confidence and capability, and that's exactly what small special forces teams do. They're experts in what's called foreign internal defense. They deploy, they develop, they train, and they fight alongside a foreign army, becoming a force multiplier, ultimately getting those people to believe in themselves again in order to create a safe, stable, and peaceful country. I'll never forget those days. I'll never forget what evil looks like. But more importantly, I'll never forget the lessons learned on how to fight that evil and what a good tribe of good people can do to ultimately conquer that evil. After leaving the Army, I moved back home. Somehow or another, I landed a gig with the Federal Service close to my hometown. From the outside, it looked like I was living the dream. Federal gig, plenty of money, retirement, benefits, the whole nine. But on the inside, I was lacking. I had no purpose, I had no direction, and ultimately, I had lost belief that I was living a worthy life. You see, veterans, they're not struggling so much with PTSD. What they're struggling with is a lack of connectivity for a cause and a fight to believe in after the war. It turned out there was a massive insurgency going on in my hometown. Starting in the 80s and 90s, those mills and those factories started closing down. In the 90s alone, half the population left, creating a massive void. In the midst of that void, a doctor found a new economic opportunity to create a new kind of mill, the pill mill. He literally found the magic pill, an opiate, a highly addictive prescription painkiller. He then had the perfect market, a population of people who had abandoned belief in a better way of life. Steel mills had closed, and pill mills had took their place. In Sam Quinones' book, Dreamland, he describes Portsmouth as the town that led the country in the opiate epidemic, ground zero in the pill mill explosion. While I was gone, the Drug Enforcement Administration had named Portsmouth one of the worst places for prescription drug abuse, and our county led the state in overdose deaths. My town had become ground zero in a fight that I wasn't doing anything about. So I did what any sane and normal person would do. I picked up a kettlebell and I started swinging it. Fitness brought me out of my funk, cleared my mind, and enhanced my spirit. It would later go on to me opening a gym. a gym that would change my life and the lives of others. You see, I wasn't interested in opening the gym for fitness sake or for business sake. In the early days, the warehouse had no heat, had no AC. The equipment would literally freeze overnight. It would flood when it rained. And the first time my accountant told me about a spreadsheet, I went to Bed Bath & Beyond because I thought it was a bed sheet. But you fake it till you make it. But what we had was a belief and a passion. You see, what I found through my gym, I'd found a new unit, and I'd found a new mission. This is our motto at the gym. Pain is not my enemy. It is my call to greatness. And in 2010, my town was going through a lot of pain. It became a town devastated by weakness. But the way to fight that weakness is through strength. We needed to provide testing for our people to get them to believe in their capability. We had to get them to believe in themselves on a micro level so that they could believe that they could make an impact in their community on a macro level. Believe they were worthy of something greater than they were. That was the first domino of positive belief that tipped over. The next would become another team. Team, some assembly required. Happens to be one of Arnold's favorite teams as well. In around 2013, my buddy and I, my old college and Army buddy Derek Carver, started this team. A team of adaptive athletes. These are men and women, both veteran and civilian, who are missing arms, legs, or a combination thereof, but who still get after it. Our main message through them is to believe that no matter what the circumstances, you can always adapt and therefore overcome. These men and women are walking embodiments of grit and determination. This is Logan Aldridge. That is 225 pounds, well over his body weight that he can put over his head with one arm. He can do that not because he's gifted. He can do that because every day he overcomes challenges. Who here likes to fold laundry and do dishes? Right? Who here likes to do it with one arm? That's the hardest part of his day. This is Tanya, born a child of Chernobyl. She was missing legs and became a Ukrainian reject in their society. Luckily, she found her way to the United States, and even with no legs, she found her way to some running shoes. And since that time, the only nuclear part on her body is her smile that radiates the hearts of everyone that meets her. Because she will beat you in a marathon and smoke you in a 5K. And my old Army buddy, my college buddy, he lost his leg in 2010 in Afghanistan on a rocket attack. I just happened to be at Walter Reed when he got flown in off the battlefield. In the last 8 years, I've witnessed him undergo countless surgeries, blood transfusions, countless legs that he breaks all the time. But more than that, he's now the world's strongest adaptive athlete. He does that because his strength is a result of his suffering. He found a flicker through all the darkness, and he found a new mission, honoring the men who died by his side that day by living a worthy life. A few years after Team Star was established, there was a female member inside of my gym by the name of Renee. She started making all-natural products. And after witnessing the competitions that the adaptive athletes go through, they can get some pretty significant rashes and burns on their limbs that fit in their prosthetics. So I approached her one day to see if she could come up with a first aid ointment to be given to those guys and to be sold to the members in our gym. She came up with a prototype. We signed a deal in my kitchen for a 50-50 partnership for a company that would be called Doc Spartan. A year from that time in my kitchen, we were in Hollywood filming an episode for Shark Tank. And I know you guys are dramatically disappointed I'm not wearing those shorts here today. They've been retired. We had no business going on that show. Earlier, I just told you I didn't know the difference between a bed sheet and a spreadsheet. All right? But what we had was belief. Belief that if we could go on that show, we could be an example to other people in our town that you can use that river again to ship out products proudly made in Portsmouth. That the only way to fight poverty is through commerce. Luckily, a shark by the name of Robert Herjavec believed in us too. Gave us a shot. And since that time, we've shipped out tens of thousands of units that we make ourselves and ship out of ourselves in the other half of the gym down in Portsmouth. More important than that is we begin to give belief to the folks in our town. There's been over 9 new businesses that have opened, breweries, restaurants, and there's been 3 new gyms that have popped up in the county alone, all dedicated to fighting to bringing their town back. Ultimately and finally, I'd like to give you an unbelievable story of belief that occurred inside the gym. On the left is Michael, on the right is Dale. Michael was one of my first clients at the old warehouse gym. He was a 280-pound smoker, overweight, and I didn't think he'd last very long. Luckily, he did. Fast forward a few years later, he dropped over 80 pounds and was now on staff as a full-time trainer. He saw that by testing himself, you could gain capability and belief, and he wanted to give that to other people. Someone in desperate need of belief at that time was Dale. Dale's a local English professor at the university. He had just lost his son due to drug overdose in Mexico, of all places. The way he had to identify the body was by seeing photos sent over email. The body itself had to be returned in ashes. To help mask his pain, he turned to medications and alcohol, trying to make sense of a new world without his son. Michael decided to go back to school and walked into Dale's English class. After a couple classes, Michael eventually got him to join the gym. Dale had never been to a gym in his life. After a few weeks, Dale started to lose weight and gain capability. One day in class, Dale asked Michael to write about a transformative experience in his life. Michael chose to write about a time 20 years ago in the past where he almost lost his life. After a night of partying, him and his buddy were out driving. He was a passenger. His friend was a driver in a vehicle that, when it crossed the bridge, lost control, went over the bridge, landed in a creek. His friend would ultimately die and drown that night. The only reason Michael would survive is because somebody pulled him out of the creek and onto the bank. He spent a lot of time wondering about who that person was. But ultimately, he felt pain and guilt for what had happened, that he survived. So he turned to drugs to comfort himself. After several years, he had had enough, and through faith, he decided to get off drugs. But he'd always remembered and always wondered who that person was. Dale often wondered, too, about that night. He wondered, too, because as he read the paper, he was there. He was the person who had pulled Michael onto the bank, ultimately saving his life. Some 20 years ago, Dale had saved Michael's life. Now Michael was returning the favor. Since that time, some 3 years ago, Dale's down over 70 pounds, off all of his medications, and in the best shape of his life. And the two of them have joined up now to help train and teach people going through drug addiction at counseling centers. More important than that, Dale found a way to believe in himself again. Now, more than ever, we all need to find a way to believe in ourselves again. And to understand, to do that, you will encounter pain. But you got to find that fight in your backyard. You got to find your tribe, and you got to arm yourself through training. It will be painful. But my friends, remember, pain is not your enemy. It could just be your call to greatness.